How do I respond to people who say they have been to heaven? And this is the subject of, best-selling books. There's that little 4-year-old kid, Colton Burpo, who his parents said, he died, but when he came back, he died, according to the doctors. But then he came back to life, like they rescued him. And he said that while he was incapacitated, he had gone to heaven. And his explanation of what that's like is so vivid. And look at how real it had to be real, right? And Dr. Eben Alexander was a more recent one. He wrote a book, and like heaven is real. And he talked about how the doctor said as a doctor, he's a smart dude, right? He was dead and he went to heaven and he came back. And it's funny because their explanations of heaven, whether it's those two guys or anybody else who has the story, and a lot of people have the story, their explanations of heaven are almost too similar, which I think a lot of Christians would say, see, that's evidence that it actually happened. And I would argue, no, that's proof that we all kind of have the same conception of what heaven is like. Angels and clouds and harps and things like that. That's the general idea of heaven. If I were to have a dream about what heaven is like, that's probably what it would sound like to me too. And the funny thing is, as detailed as their stories are, for every Colton Burpo book that is out there, and there are many, there are books that pick apart his story and explain that, this thing that they said there was no way he could have known, well, there is a way he could have known that, and here it is. I remember reading a piece that ripped apart Dr. Alexander's book, and, they said, he said he was dead, like legally dead for many days. But actually, they talked to the doctors in question or the nurses in question, and they said, no, that wasn't really the case. Or Dr. Alexander said, this is what the weather was like when I was out of question, and it was, I forgot the details, but, the weather was like this. And the author of this piece said, I talked to a meteorologist who could actually look up what the weather was like, and it's not what the guy said it was. It's like, they reconstruct these stories in their head. They believe it to be real. I'm not calling either of those guys liars. I think they really believe they were in heaven and back. But I think a lot of us could experience, when we're on the verge of death, you have a lot of ideas, a lot of hallucinations, a lot of things that are very vivid to you. And hey, if you are fortunate enough to come back to life, or to, at least get out of the coma or whatever stage you're in, of course you want to talk about what that was like. You saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Tell us what that was like. And of course, the more they tell the story, the more descriptive it becomes. And the more descriptive it is, the more believable it is. Because why would anyone make something up like that? It's always funny to me that you always see more people who say, I almost died and I went to heaven. You never hear about their journeys of when they went to hell. Shouldn't there be an equal number of books of people saying, I almost died, and then I saw Satan and he was coming to take me away? Those books never sell. So you don't hear about those stories very much because everyone wants to be, they want to hear something optimistic. And telling people that heaven is for real isn't just a good story. It's a marketing gimmick. It's a great marketing gimmick. So I don't know. I don't believe any of this stuff. Every time I hear a story about someone who said they went to heaven, and it's always a Christian version of heaven too. You never hear a Buddhist say, I got reincarnated and this is what my past several lives were like, and it's always verified. That never happens. It's never verified like that. And you never hear any, other religion that buys into the same idea here. And again, why does that happen? Maybe it's because we start hearing these stories. Oh, that guy died and went to heaven. Maybe if I'm on the verge of death, I might go to heaven too. You just have to ask yourself, where are the citations for these stories? Are there third-party independent people who can verify all these things they are saying? And the truth is, no one can verify what they're saying. No one can back it up. There are holes in all of their stories that people who want to believe them, they just overlook because they want to believe the story, because they want to believe that there is something waiting for us on the other side. And again, I understand that. I empathize with that. But there isn't, and the proof isn't there, and those books are not proof. If they say they almost died, they went to heaven, okay, I'm glad you're alive, I'm glad you're doing okay, but we don't have to take your hallucination that seriously. Every time I hear their stories, I just want to say citation needed, because all the stuff they are saying, the only people who believe it happen to be the people in their circles. And when they cite these third parties, like this doctor of mine, he has no stake in what happened to me, but even he said I was legally dead. It's like, well, no, maybe there was something wrong with the diagnosis. Maybe you were never going to die in the first place. Maybe they thought you were dead, but you really weren't. Maybe there's some bad medicine going around. But there's still no evidence that anyone has ever been to heaven and come back to tell us about it. There's no evidence that anyone went to hell and came back to tell us about it either. These are stories we want to believe, and especially if you're prone to believing it, it might happen to you. Like, there's a reason it's only religious people who believe they can talk to Jesus, and they vividly can tell you about a time Jesus was talking to them. Like, those hallucinations never happen to, like, non-Christians. And even if it did, even if an atheist said, like, man, I saw angels, I saw wings, it doesn't mean it actually happened. It means that they too, we all have this conception of what heaven looks like, whether or not you believe in it. And there's a reason we all kind of coalesce around those same ideas if we are in that unfortunate position that we are suffering from some, disease, or, we had an accident. There's a reason we all might picture the same sort of afterlife, because it's the story we're all accustomed to. If you ask those people who died and said they saw angels, draw what the angels look like, it's amazing how similar those angels will look. It's not like they ever deviate from the haloed, wing flapping angels that you always picture. It's the same reason if you ask people what Martians look like, they always look like Hollywood's version of what Martians look like. It's never anything unique that they came up with on their own. They have this idea like, oh, I got abducted by aliens, and oh, my experience was just like that movie that you saw or that sci-fi book that you read. It's the same principle at work here, which is we all have the same ideas of the supernatural, of aliens, of all the science fiction stuff. So of course, if you have a dream or you have an idea that is so vivid that it feels real to you, it is very similar to all those ideas that are passed around anyway. It's just another reason not to take people seriously when they say they've had that experience. My name is Hemant Mehta. I write at friendlyatheist.com. If you'd like to leave a comment or question below, we'd love to check it out.